Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. So I'm gonna wrap up everything that I read in June in this video, and like we've been talking about for the past few months, I've been in a horrible reading slump, but I was still pretty pleased with how many books that I read in June. Stuck to some really short books, read some stuff on audio, I read some stuff on my Kindle, so all in all it turned out to be a pretty great month. So we're gonna wrap everything up, and there's two books that I read in June that I'm actually not going to discuss in this video because I'm going to be doing a double book review, doing a deep dive into both of those books. So I'm going to be going over them very briefly in this video, and then in the next video that comes out I'm going to be doing a little bit more of a deep dive into both of those because I was sent both of them for review copies. So starting off with my DNFs, so I had 2 DNFs this month, and like I said, because I have been a little bit slumpy, I'm not sure if these are DNFs forever, but I just decided to put them down, and I might pick them up in the future. I'm not really too sure. So the first one that I DNF'd was Anna Dressed in Blood by Kendara Blake, and this author is really hit or miss for me. Of course, in Every Generation that I've been talking about nonstop on the channel since I read it a few months ago is my favorite read of the year so far. She was very in her groove with doing like a Buffy themed book, but I tried reading All These Bodies, I believe earlier this year or late last year, by her as well, and I found I was about 50 to 55% into the book and I just didn't really care about it, so I had put it down. And then I said, well, I really enjoyed In Every Generation, so let's try another one. And I know that the Anna Dressed in Blood series has gotten a lot of really rave reviews, and I found that like with All These Bodies, I couldn't get into it. I just really didn't care. I wasn't attaching to any of the characters. So honestly, I wasn't very far into the book, maybe about 20% or so, and I was just like, you know what? I was just almost dreading sort of picking it up because I knew I wasn't really into it. So I just put that one down, and like I said, I might pick it up later, not really too sure. And then the second book that I DNF'd this month was The Haunting of Lee Harker by Darcy Coates. And Darcy Coates, I think I might actually do a video on her and on her writing at some point, because I have a lot of thoughts and a lot of opinions about her and the way she writes her books. So this one, you know, your normal Darcy Coates haunted house sort of situation, but the writing style was quite different with this one, and I wasn't really, same with the other one that I tried to get into, I just wasn't really getting into it. I wasn't vibing with the writing style that she was using in this particular book, which was kind of outside of what she normally writes like, and I couldn't really get into it. So again, I put this one down, and I actually picked up another Darcy Coates book in its place because I was kind of looking for her style of story, I guess, at the time, which is very cozy for me. So I just put this one down. Like I said, I don't know if I'm putting them down forever. It wasn't a bad book at all. Neither one of these are bad books. You know, if you're interested in them, please go ahead and pick them up. It's just with the way I'm feeling right now, if I'm not getting into something, I'm just putting it aside and trying to pick up something else. So those are the DNFs for this month, and for now, let's get into the books that I actually did read. So the first book that I read in June was Mina and the Undead by Amy McCaw, and I showed this book in a recent tag video that I did, but I haven't talked about it, I don't think, really in depth. So like I said, I'm going to be doing a double review, and this is going to be one of the books that's coming up for review in my next video. But this is an absolutely beautiful book. The cover of it is very striking. I absolutely love it. This is like a beautiful book just with the way the aesthetic is set out. So really enjoyed this one. So I will be talking more about this book in an upcoming video. And then the other one that I got sent for review was Mandy by Stephanie Sparks, and I just finished this one a couple of days ago. I raved about it over on my Instagram, but I haven't gone into like an in-depth review quite yet. But Stephanie Sparks has really been a go-to author for me. I very much vibe with her writing and her stories, and this was just a non-stop craze fest is all I can describe it. It's fantastic. So I'm going to be getting into more in-depth reviews of both of these books in an upcoming video, so stay tuned for that. And the next book that I read on audio book, and this was fantastic. So I've talked about a few times on the channel before about different podcasts or different documentaries that I've watched about NXIVM, about the cult that's called NXIVM, and it's absolutely crazy. So the next book that I read is Don't Call It a Cult: The Shocking Story of Keith Raniere and the Women of NXIVM by Sarah Berman. And this was a fantastic book. So, and I would highly recommend reading it on audio too. There's just something about true crime documentary style books or investigative journalism that you read on audio that it just, I don't know, it really adds to the whole experience. I don't know if it maybe reminds me of the true crime podcasts that I love so much, which could be. So if you have a chance, pick up a copy of this on audio. It's fantastic. So basically here, it really goes into the backstory of Keith Raniere, his upbringing, the way he thinks, the sort of stuff that he was involved in to try to make it seem like he was the smartest man in the world, but he really wasn't. And I don't want to give any of the story away, but you know, in a way, and like any cult leader, they are brilliant in their own way because they can get people to really latch on to what they're trying to put out there in the world. And I mean, especially the women that latched onto his ideals and started to recruit and stuff like that, you know, they went in just face and eyes into it, and these people were billionaires and in some cases they were doctors and really brilliant people, and he managed to loop them in. And this book is just fantastic. So if you know about NXIVM or you're looking to learn a bit more about it, this was fantastic. It had a lot of information in it that wasn't in the other documentaries that I had watched or listened to. So I really, really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4.5 stars. And for any, like I said, anyone that's interested in NXIVM, but any true crime lover in general, I think would really, really enjoy this book. And there was also a documentary that I watched this month at the same time that I was reading the book. And I'll have to look up the name in a second, but it was so good. So it followed the story of India Oxenberg and how she got wrapped into NXIVM and Jeunesse and DOS and the whole thing, because there were like subgroups within NXIVM, and of course they were all sex trafficked and all of that, and it's just an absolutely crazy story. So it's on Amazon Prime and it's called Seduced: Inside the NXIVM Cult. And it follows her story specifically of India Oxenberg, but it does go over the stories of other people and how the cult formed and sort of the inner workings. And it does interview a lot of the inner people that finally did manage to break away from that. So that's a really good accompanying thing to watch while you're reading the book, or, you know, after you're done. Another really, really good one, I've mentioned it several times on the channel before. It's called Escaping NXIVM, and it's part of the Uncover podcast. It's season 1 of the Uncover podcast done by CBC here in Canada. And that one follows a different story, but around the same cult and how they got wrapped into it and what happened to them and everything. So don't want to go too far into it, because if you don't know anything about this cult, it's wild. It's absolutely bonkers. And I think everybody needs to read about this because it's insane. So really, really great book, the Don't Call It a Cult. I highly recommend that one. And then after I DNF'd The Haunting of Lee Harker, I wanted to pick up another Darcy Coates book, and I'll get into another video of why, like my whole thoughts about her writing style, her books, all of that. But her haunted house books are very comforting in a particular way, and so I picked up The Haunting of Blackwood Manor, and you know, it was a Darcy Coates book. It was 3.5 stars. I thought it was good. It was very comfy, cozy. All of the haunted house feels that you would expect from a Darcy Coates book if you have read her before. I did enjoy it, but I didn't like it as much as Ashburn House. I thought Ashburn House had a little bit of a better story behind it. But having said that, like I said, I still really, really enjoyed it. So I often say that I wish she would break out of her formula a little bit, because she just pumps out books like absolutely crazy. So I wanted to pick up something that was familiar and cozy and something that I knew most likely that I would enjoy. That's why I actually picked up The Haunting of Lee Harker at first. It didn't end up vibing with me, so I went on to this one. And but I do want to pick up her, I think it's her most recent book. It's called Below or something to that effect. It just came out, and it's kind of outside of her normal formula that she writes in. So excited to pick that one up. Probably going to be my next Darcy Coates read, but I think I'm going to put her down for a little while and maybe pick up that one a few months from now. But as for Blackwood Manor, you know, 3.5 stars. It was a Darcy Coates book. It was creepy cozy, and if you like that style of writing, please go ahead and pick that one up. And then in June, I also took part in the Scary Sleepover Weekend Read and Watch-a-thon. So unfortunately, I didn't do my reading and or watching until this past weekend, which was actually a week after everybody else had done their reading, because there were things out in the news and stuff like that that I didn't really feel like picking anything new up. I was feeling very heavy at the time, so I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna bump it and then I can enjoy my read and watch-a-thon. So I did end up watching Poltergeist, which was great, and it came out in June of 1982, so 40 years ago, so I thought that was great to wrap that into the readathon. And I did watch some other movies as well. The slasher movie that I picked was Idle Hands, which is not really a slasher, but it's, you know, the blood, guts, and gore kind of movie, so I watched that one as well. And then for my reading, I picked up #1 in the Goosebumps series, so this is Welcome to Dead House, and this is about a young girl and boy, brother and sister, that their family moves into this house, and obviously the house is haunted. So I have to say, I really enjoyed this one. I remembered a few things from it from when I was a kid, but I mean, when I read the Goosebumps series, it was like 30 odd years ago. So a lot of these, when I'm picking them up now, they seem like they're very, very new. So I have to say that this one is pretty gruesome in places for a kid's book. So I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. It was a good time. I sat down and read it kind of, you know, throughout one day. And like I said, it was pretty scary. So definitely going to continue reading some Goosebumps here from time to time. And like with the Fear Street, I'm going to continue to read these in publication order. And then the next book that I read was Vampires of Ottawa, and I can't find my copy right now. It's buried in the shelves somewhere, or probably still laying on one of my desks after I read it. But this was such a cheesy good time. It was great. So obviously this takes place in the city of Ottawa, and we follow a young girl who travels there from, I believe, Manitoba for a public speaking competition, and she loves vampires, and she actually won a spot to go to this competition, and her speech was on vampires. So it was really great to have that sort of undercurrent wrapped in there, especially after reading Mina and the Undead. I was in very much a vampire type mood, so that was great. And really, this book, like, it revolves around the story of her meeting this very mysterious older gentleman who ends up being a vampire, and it kind of revolves around that story. But I have to say that I really enjoyed the fact that this is it was very much a love letter to Ottawa. It talked about the Rideau Canal and Rideau Hall and different landmarks and different things that people love to do in the city. And so anyone who's never traveled there, whether you're Canadian or from outside of the country, it is really great, because especially this is for younger readers, like it's a middle grade story, so, you know, kids can learn about the city and the different kinds of things that they have there. So it was very much a love letter to the city, and had a great vampire story wrapped into it as well. So super, super short. I believe it might have been 100 pages. So middle grade story, vampires, great adventure, and I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was a really, really great time. And then finally, the last book that I read in June, and this was a good one. It's The Scariest Stories You've Ever Heard, Part 2 by Catherine Burt. And I had this book when I was a kid because I specifically remember this creepy old lady on the front here. that sticks out in my mind very vividly from when I was a child. And I received a copy of this as a gift when I put in an order with one of my favorite Etsy shops, and she put it in there for me. And I was so happy because I remember that I read this book so often when I was a kid that it actually fell apart. So this is a very short book of short stories, and like I said in my review on Instagram and Goodreads, the reason why I think I love it so much is that there's no fluff, there's no filler, it's just unapologetic, spooky, creepy, gross stories that kids are gonna love. So these are very harrowing in some places. Some of these stories, you know, for the target audience that they're going for, are pretty crazy. They're pretty creepy. Some of them are very bloody, and I loved it. I loved it from cover to cover. I loved every single one of the stories in here, and it's one of those books that you probably give to your kid and you're like, oh, you know, maybe it's going to be too scary, this goes too far, but kids love this stuff. And, you know, as long as it's not giving them active nightmares or whatever, let them read it. You know, if they're reading, let them read it. That's my motto anyway. And I remember, now that I've reread the stories, I remember why I loved them so much as a kid. And like I said, I read the copy that I had when I was younger. I read it until it fell apart. It literally fell apart. And this came out, I believe, in 1989. Yeah, 1989. So I was 7 years old when this book came out, and I did buy it brand new. So, you know, pretty gruesome, gross stories. And if you can get your hands on a copy of it, I highly recommend it. I gave it 5 stars. I enjoyed every second that I was sat down with this book. So if you can find a copy, please go pick it up. And I'm gonna look for the other volumes in this collection as well, because they're just fantastic stories. So there you go, that was everything that I read in June. So like I said, even though that I'm still kind of struggling a little bit with that reading slump, I think overall I did pretty good with my reading. So I read 6 or 7 books, 7 or 8 books or whatever, and I ended up enjoying pretty much everything that I read. Just 2 DNFs, and like I said, the only reason why I put them down was because right now I'm just not vibing with it, so I decided to pick up something else. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to give me a thumbs up, leave me a question or a comment down below because you know I love chatting with you. But until next time, stay spooky, guys. Bye.